For our unit on statistics, we will be doing work using R. This video introduces the program and its basic grammar. You should follow along with the steps I describe in the video on your own computer. At the end of this video, you should be able to open RStudio and an R script on your computer, and you should be ready to learn how to open and edit data files. Finally, you should be familiar with sources for help online. You may have a hard time installing R onto your computer. You can check out my video on working directories as well, but don't worry, we are going to go over this in class. There are several computer programs that perform advanced statistics out there. Programs like Stata and SPSS have been around for longer, and R is not the easiest statistical program to use. So why do we use R? Basically because it is free, while other programs cost between $30 and $50. But there are other advantages of R as well. Since it is open source software, it's very flexible and you can get it to do almost anything you need. It has the best graphics software out there, and it is the most commonly used statistics program in political science. But the main reason I introduce students to R is basically because writing code in R is similar to writing computer code. In particular, it's similar in design to the programming language Python, one of the most common ways to code today. So by learning the basics of how to use R, you can determine your interest in learning coding more generally. Before I explain the basics of how R works, let me show you how to download it. As noted, R is not particularly easy to use, but it is also very popular. What this means in practice is that people have developed another computer program to use to make R easier. This is called RStudio, and you need to have both R and RStudio installed on your computer to do assignments for this class. If it helps, you can think of R as being like an operating system for your computer, like iOS or Windows, and RStudio is an app that runs off that operating system. Download both of these programs from their websites. The links are on our slides and on our Canvas page. Download R first. You go to the link, and then you click on Download R. The first thing you will need to do is select what server you will download R from. You should choose the one that is physically closest to you. In our case, go down to the United States, to Duke University. Note that there are different links if you have a Macintosh or a PC. You also need to check how old your Macintosh is before downloading. You do this by going up to the Apple in the top left-hand corner, going to About This Mac, and then checking to see what kind of processor your computer has. This one also happens to tell me that my computer is from 2017. What's important here is that I have an Intel processor. This is an older computer with an older chip. If you click on the Mac operating systems, you can see here that there are different links for new Macintoshes that have M1 or M2 chips and old Macintoshes that have Intel chips. So please make sure that you click on the correct package for you specifically. Following the link for Windows, all you need to do is click on Install R for the first time, download R for Windows. The file will take a few minutes to download, and once the download is complete, you should open up the file, which will automatically install R on your computer. Downloading RStudio is more straightforward. The website is going to automatically detect your operating system, so all you need to do is click Download. Again, it'll take a moment for the file to download. Then, in order to install RStudio, you drag RStudio into the Applications folder. In this class, you're only ever going to open up RStudio. You'll never open up R. So open up RStudio, and if you open up an R script, I'll get to that in a moment, make sure the default is to open that with RStudio. This is how you make sure that if you open up a script, a file that ends in .r, it opens with the right application. You can right-click on the script, and then choose Open With, and make sure RStudio is the default. If it is not the default, go to Other, select RStudio, and then select Always Open With. Note, if this does not work for you, don't worry, you're not alone. You can watch my video on working directories for more information on how your computer works generally, but we are going to spend time in class making sure absolutely everyone can open and operate R. The next step is to open a script. I will always provide you with sample scripts that include the code you need for assignments. For class activities, these samples may have intentional errors in them, so you can practice fixing problems. But for homework assignments, I won't do that. For this video, you should download the sample script intro to R.R from our Canvas page, and then double-click it to open it. Note that any file that ends in .r is an R script. And again, please make sure that your computer has used RStudio to open the file. Note that in R, scripts are called files. So the other way to open the sample script I wrote for this lesson is to open RStudio, then go to File, Open File. Remember this because files are not your data, they are your computer code. Anyway, when you open up a script in RStudio, you will see 4 different boxes on your screen. In the top left, you will see files that you have opened, including scripts and data. The bottom left has the console. This is where you can see what the computer is actually doing. In particular, if you see some statistics, the results will show up in this bottom left corner. The boxes on the right are not as essential, but still useful. The top right has environments. This is where you can see what objects you have created in R and access them. The bottom right is where any graphs that you produce will show up and where you can access help files. So I have said the word script a few times. What does this actually mean? R is a computer language. It works by you writing specific commands that you then run, and the computer does what you tell it to. You can write these commands in the console and they'll work, but they aren't saved anywhere. The best thing to do is to write your commands in a script. It is just a file that stores all your code so that you can use it again later. So as noted, the way R works is by writing a command and then executing it. There are a few ways to execute a command in a script. The first is to place your cursor on the line that you want to run. You then have 2 options. Click the Run button, or use Command Enter or Command Return on your keyboard. Your cursor will then automatically jump to the next line you can run. You can see the command that I chose to execute. The outcome and the results are down here in the console. If you want to run more than one command at a time, you can select all the lines you want to run and do the same thing. Hit Run. Again, we see the outcomes down here. So again, this is the basic concept. You write something down you want the computer to do, click a button, and the computer does it. Any text that you put into a script can be executed as a command, so you have to pay close attention to the details of what you write. But if you want to write yourself notes, or read my notes for you, any code that is written after a # will not execute. Writing these comments is how I will provide you information on what to do in an assignment. It's also what coders use to remind themselves of what they wrote and why they did it. Because trust me, you will forget it if you don't write it down. The first commands I need you to write and execute are to allow you to access other people's code. This is going to make it possible to do things more easily in R. These packages of additional code are called libraries. R is open source, which means anyone can write code to do statistics or modify data. They can create libraries to use in R just like coders create apps to use on a smartphone. So in this class, we're going to use a library called Tidyverse that makes it easy to modify data files and make graphs. In order to use a library, you need to do 2 things. First, you need to download it onto your computer, and then you need to tell R you want to use it. You only need to download it once. This is called installing a package. The command is install.packages. Then you can see here the name of the library, Tidyverse, is here inside the parentheses and quotation marks. So what you should do is put your cursor on this line, then hit the Run button to install this package on your computer. I already have this installed, so it's asking me to reload. And it will take you a few more minutes to install Tidyverse on your computer than it is me. This is because, again, I already have it installed. Installing a package will allow R to access the correct code. But you still need to tell R you want to use the code, or call up its library. At the beginning of each script, you need to type library tidyverse, this line of code, or library with whatever code you need in parentheses. You have to run this line of code every single time you open up R, or you'll get an error message. Of course, coding as R is more difficult than typing and hitting run. Learning R is like learning a foreign language. It has specific rules and a grammar that you need to understand to get it to do what you want. Specifically, R is what's called an object-oriented language. What this means is that the program stores information in things we call objects. An object can be anything from a single number to a column of data. We call this a vector. Could be an entire spreadsheet of data or multiple data files. This is what gives R its flexibility. But what it means for you in practice is that if you want to do anything with data in R, you need to assign that data to an object. First, you need to come up with a name for your object. It can be anything. In this example, it's just called data. Then you need to draw a backwards arrow. This uses the less than sign, or shift comma, and then a dash. That's what I mean by a backwards arrow. Then you type the command read_CSV and the file name here in parentheses. For right now, note that commands almost always look like this. Command, whatever it is, then parentheses, and then if there's text that you need, it'll be in quotation marks. Coding in R is not super hard, but it's also not intuitive, and you are going to make a lot of mistakes as you move forward. If you get an error message when you do something, for example, read it. Error messages appear in the console, the bottom left part of your screen. Sometimes you can understand what the message is saying. For example, if you try to call up a library without installing a package, you get a message saying there is no package called this. What that means is that you need to install the package. Sometimes, though, the error message is confusing, or you just can't remember what command you are supposed to use to do something. In those cases, there are many ways to get help. The first way I recommend is to use the Help tab in RStudio. It's here in the bottom right part of your screen, and it's the best thing to use if you remember a command name, but not the details of how to use it. This tab pulls up the directions of how to use each command. At the bottom of this file, there'll be examples that often are the simplest way to understand how to use the command. But if I can't remember anything about what I need to do, Google works well. This is what I tend to do when I get an error message I don't understand. I'll copy the entire error message and then Google it. Unfortunately, the first things that tend to come up tend to be forums like Stack Overflow that are essentially like Reddit for computer scientists. Sometimes you can understand these responses, sometimes you can't. So for you, I actually recommend you go to one of the following websites. Cookbook for R is an accessible general introduction to R, while R for Data Science provides information on tidyverse commands. Curated help is always better. Finally, if you'd like to learn more about R, or go through a more standard introduction to coding, DataCamp has excellent online self-paced courses that you can take. The introductory ones are free. So that's your basic introduction to R. Again, for our first class, all I want you to be able to do is download and access R in RStudio on your computer, and to be able to open up a file. We'll discuss everything in more detail over time, so don't worry.